She has no parents, no dowry, and no status. Why should I respect her? My mother-in-law's words rang through the banquet hall like a slap, silencing every guest mid-bite. I was still in my wedding dress, kneeling in front of her, the hem soaked in spilled tea, my hands trembling against the cold marble floor. I heard someone gasp. A child started crying in the corner, but I didn't lift my head, not because I agreed, but because I understood something in that moment. This wasn't just a ceremony to her. This was a warning. My new husband sat beside her, not once meeting my eyes. Some women marry up, she continued, loud enough for everyone to hear, but that doesn't mean they become worthy. You'll never be one of us. I swallowed hard, tasted blood where I'd bitten my lip. Everyone was watching, friends, family, neighbors. Some looked away in pity. Others smirked. No one stood up for me. That night, while they danced and toasted in the ballroom, I stood on the hotel rooftop barefoot, staring at the city lights below and whispering a promise to myself: you will never humiliate me again. One day, I'll take back everything you stole, even the floor beneath your feet. And I meant it. The wedding was just the prelude. The real performance began once the guests were gone and the doors closed behind me. From the first morning in that house, I was no longer a bride, I was a servant. At 6 a.m., my mother-in-law knocked on our door, with a broom in her hand. The wife rises before the sun, she said flatly. Unless you think you're a guest here. While her daughter slept in until noon and my husband played video games in the living room, I scrubbed floors, cooked breakfast, washed her feet, and boiled herbal medicine she never drank. If I spoke up, she'd call it talking back. If I stayed silent, she called it sullen. She'd remind me daily of what I lacked: no parents to speak for you. No property to your name. We married you out of kindness. That word, kindness, was her favorite weapon. It excused every cruelty. One afternoon, I prepared a full table for the family: steamed fish, lotus root soup, braised pork belly, her favorites. She took one look and sneered, "You must be trying to poison me. Look at this slop." Then, in front of everyone, she dumped the entire pot into the trash and ordered takeout for herself and her daughter. My husband laughed uncomfortably and kept scrolling on his phone. I remember standing at the sink afterward, hands in cold water, feeling my tears fall silently into the soap. But the deepest cut came when my father collapsed from a stroke. I had saved for emergencies, my own salary, tucked away over months. When I asked to access it, she folded her arms and said, "That money's been moved. Family emergencies mean our side of the family. You married in, remember." I called every friend I had left, sold my jewelry, and found a way to get my father into a local clinic. He died 6 months later, quietly, while I was preparing dinner at her house. No one even paused to acknowledge it. That night, I sat on the balcony with a blanket around my shoulders, looking at the glow of windows in other apartments. Families were laughing. Dinners clinking. Lives moving. And mine had been traded for a cage wrapped in red ribbon. But I didn't scream. I didn't run. I endured, because I had already begun planning. They thought I was small because I stayed quiet. Because I kept my head down. Because I didn't talk back when insulted or protest when dismissed. But that was never weakness, it was calculation. Long before I married into their family, I was someone else, a quiet achiever from a poor town, who graduated top of her class, and passed the National Civil Service exam on her first try. I was offered a position in the municipal office back home, a stable job for life, but when I got engaged, my mother-in-law insisted that a working daughter-in-law would embarrass the family. Only low-income families need 2 incomes, she said. So I gave it up. That was the first sacrifice. It wasn't the last. What they didn't see, because they never bothered to ask, was what I did in the quiet hours between chores. While she napped and they watched dramas, I built an online identity. I started writing short articles under a pen name, simple things about budgeting, household economics, property taxes. My posts began to circulate. Then came sponsors. Then came passive income. With the little I earned, I bought books, enrolled in discounted online courses, joined quiet Telegram groups, where off-market properties were discussed. Every Sunday, when they sent me to the wet market, I detoured to the local courthouse to sit in on probate disputes. I learned how distressed assets were transferred, how property rights could be reassigned, how undervalued land changed hands. I became obsessed with paperwork, not for revenge, but for survival. Still, I played my part at home. I washed dishes with a bowed head, made tea on command, and swallowed every insult whole. But while they mocked me for being simple, I was quietly developing a map of every property they owned, every flaw in its documentation, every unpaid tax that could be leveraged later. It wasn't just knowledge I gathered. It was patience. Because the difference between being buried and being planted is what you do while you're underground, and I was growing. 3 years into the marriage, the cracks began to show, not in me, but in them. My husband lost his job at the logistics firm after a company restructure. He was devastated, but not desperate. "I'm not flipping burgers," he said, waving off job offers. His mother agreed. "A man from our family doesn't stoop. We just need to wait for something respectable." So they waited. And waited. And the savings thinned. Her jewelry disappeared one by one, first the bracelets, then the jade ring she swore she'd pass down to her daughter. The household grew colder. The meat dishes disappeared from our dinners. Bills were paid late. Once, the water was shut off for 2 days, and I heard her mutter, "She's a curse." Ever since she came, everything has fallen apart. Still, I said nothing. But quietly, my little online empire had grown. I was now ghostwriting content for financial advisors, earning ad revenue, and getting commissions for helping mid-tier investors find forgotten properties. I'd already bought my first unit, a 2-bedroom flat in a declining neighborhood with potential for rezoning. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I didn't tell a soul. Then the letter arrived. An official government notice about the title dispute on the house they lived in. It turned out her late husband had inherited it through informal means, never formalized in court. Technically, the land was in limbo. That was when she panicked. I watched as she ran around the house making calls, cursing bureaucrats, trying to chase down old witnesses and untraceable documents. My husband sat on the couch, useless and pale. Finally, one evening, she turned to me. Not with cruelty, but with something worse, need. "If you still have those savings you were hoarding before your father got sick," she said, "now's the time to prove your worth to this family." I tilted my head and blinked at her. What savings? She didn't know I'd already attended the land auction. She didn't know the firm that was helping her untangle the property was funded by the blog that bore my fake name. She didn't know that the sale had already gone through, and she certainly didn't know who owned the deed now. They thought I was still poor, still powerless, still theirs. But I had stopped being theirs the day they left me to bury my father alone. When the official property documents came in the mail, I ran my fingers over my name printed in ink. Not a proxy. Not a company. Me. Just me. I sat at our cramped kitchen table that night, where I'd peeled vegetables while they mocked my peasant fingers, and quietly read the clause that gave me full rights to the land. The house where they humiliated me, where I wasn't allowed to decorate even a single wall without permission, was now mine. Bought legally, fair and square, through channels they never even knew existed. But I didn't rush. I waited. I kept cooking their meals, scrubbing their floors, enduring their passive-aggressive comments. Why? Because strategy is not about retaliation. It's about timing. First, I changed the locks on my rental flat, making it my new home. I moved out under the pretense of needing space to freelance better, and they welcomed the news, finally some breathing room. In truth, I was preparing for the next phase. Next, I sent a notice from the legal office that had handled the title transfer. The property now had a new owner. 60 days to either sign a lease or vacate. I watched her read the letter in the living room. Her hands trembled. She screamed my husband's name. He rushed out, read the page, and went pale. It's a mistake, he said. It has to be. I walked in carrying a tray of tea and set it down between them like I'd done 1,000 times. Only this time, I said, it's not a mistake. It's a decision. One I made after you made yours, over and over. Her eyes darted between us, still not believing. You can stay, I said, calmly. Pay market rent. Monthly. On time. Otherwise, the new owner begins the eviction process. You're bluffing, she spat. You wouldn't dare. I handed her a second envelope, this one containing her signature from the land reassignment forms she'd signed without reading, trusting the consultants I had sent. Sometimes, I said, paper cuts deeper than words. They had underestimated me for years. Because I cooked. Because I cleaned. Because I kept my voice soft. But strategy wears many faces, and mine wore an apron. She stormed into my flat uninvited, just like she had entered every room I'd ever been in, without knocking, without permission. Only this time, I didn't rise. I stayed seated on the sofa, legs crossed, sipping tea slowly. You think this little game makes you powerful, she hissed, tossing the lease agreement onto my table like trash. You humiliate your elders just to feel important. I met her eyes. For the first time, she looked smaller. Not weak, but unraveling. No, I said, you humiliated yourself. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. My husband was behind her, silent. Torn. Still caught between fear of her and disbelief that I, his quiet wife, had pulled the rug out from beneath them. You plotted against us, she shouted, voice rising. You came into our home like a parasite, and turned my son against me. I set my cup down. I cooked every meal with care. I never asked for gold or gifts. I served your family for years without complaint. I gave up my career, my savings. My father died, and none of you stood beside me. My voice didn't shake, it rang. I didn't plot, I adapted, and I survived. She lunged forward suddenly, slamming her hands on the table. We took you in out of pity. You were nothing. I stood slowly, walked to a drawer, and pulled out a thick file of documents, bank records, land titles, the corporate chain that led back to the blog that helped fund the house purchase. Then look what, nothing, built while you weren't watching. She opened it with trembling hands, flipping through page after page as her mouth parted in disbelief. Her son reached over and read with her. Silence grew heavy between them. This is fraud, she whispered, voice breaking. It has to be illegal. It's not, I said. But how would you know? You never bothered to understand the law, only to manipulate it when you thought no one was watching. She slumped back into the chair, breath shallow. And then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. So what do you want? I looked her in the eye, every memory of humiliation burning behind mine. I want you to understand something. I was never yours to destroy. And from this point forward, I owe you nothing. 3 months later, the eviction notice was posted on the gate, by uniformed officers, not me. I watched from across the street, dressed in a navy pantsuit, no longer the housemaid wife they remembered, but the legal property owner. Neighbors came out, whispers flying like birds, isn't that their daughter-in-law? No, that's the landlady. She bought the house from under them, asterisk, she didn't speak when they carried out the boxes. She wore dark glasses and silence like armor, refusing to let the tears fall in public. Pride still ruled her, but it couldn't protect her anymore. My husband trailed behind, eyes hollow. He hadn't fought for me. Not once. He had stood by while I was insulted, dismissed, discarded. He'd lived off his mother's control like it was oxygen, and now, he was breathless without it. Can we talk? He asked weakly as the movers shut the truck. I looked at him for a long moment, and then simply replied, you'll have to make an appointment. With my assistant. Because while they had been fighting over titles and ego, I had quietly built something lasting. I wasn't just the owner of that one property anymore. I had acquired 3 more distressed assets through auction, using knowledge I learned while they underestimated me. My blog had evolved into a consultation platform with over 200,000 followers. Financial independence, legal protection, emotional clarity. I had built my life again, this time on my own terms. At the next neighborhood meeting, I was introduced as one of the youngest property holders in the district. Someone asked how I'd started. I smiled. By being underestimated, I said. It's a powerful currency. Later that week, a package arrived at my new flat. No note. Just a velvet box with the jade ring my mother-in-law once said I'd never be worthy to touch. I placed it in a drawer, unopened. Because some gifts are best left unclaimed.